Okay, as we're recording, John, I just want to announce that today's shir and today's broadcast, and this whole week's broadcast, is being sponsored by Shlomi Feitach and family. Le'ilu Nishmas, his Rav, who was Nifter, a big tzaddik who was Nifter this week, and his name was Rav Grainim Ben Reb Yaakov HaKohen Lezevnik, and was Chus Desire Torah of Shmario, Yosy, Chaim, and back in Israel. That's all. They're in the Shabbos have an Aliyah, and they should be made a choice for all of Klal Yisrael to take us out of this very challenging time. So I also want to mention that our learning should be for a schus for needing in Ukraine, and for all the chaylim that need the refuah, such as Shimon ben Chasio and Shimon ben Rivka and Yaakov Shmuel ben Chana and Yisrael Moshe ben Yanta Gittel and Eliyahu Fraga Favish ben Esther. Okay, so we were talking yesterday, we were discussing when Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued, did Beis Shammai follow their own halacha, or did they follow the halacha of Beis Hillel after the Baskel? So the Gemara wants to bring a raya from Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, who is 5 lines from the bottom, on the bottom of Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. So we're 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. The last 2 words on the line is Toshma. Toshma. So Amar Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri. Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri said, Heich halacha zu reveches b'Yisrael. Exactly how did they deal with this machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? How did they pass it? How did they pirzach? Because we have a problem, a contradictory problem. Because if Nasa Kedivri Beis Shammai, if we follow Beis Shammai's ruling that the Tzoros HaErva does Yibum, well, then have Vlad Mamzer L'Divri Beis Hillel. And according to Beis Hillel, the Vlad will be a Mamzer. That's not a good situation. And Nasa Kedivri Beis Hillel, if we just let this woman marry out and we don't require anything, well, then have Vlad Pogum L'Divri Beis Shammai, then this Vlad will be the child of an Isser. And Rashi says if it was a kohen, it would become Pasal L'Kahuna. So what are you supposed to do? Zok Gemara, so Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri said, Boyu unesakin lahen l'tzaris. How about we make a takana that all of these tzaris sheyehuchayil tzaris v'loy misyapos. How about we make a takana that they should do chalitza? So according to Beis Hillel, the chalitza didn't do anything. According to Beis Shammai, at least this woman now could marry the shuk and have them marry others, not the yodim. Sheyehuchayil tzaris v'loy misyapos. That's a good suggestion. But while you speak of ligmar as a dover, I guess Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri couldn't pass this takana into legislation until the session ended and he could no longer implement it. So I'm not sure what that means. I don't know the history of what happened in this Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri. But something happened that he was not able to implement this, and then the opportunity had been lost. So Amalei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said, Ma nasalahem l'tzaris harishonis me'ata. What are we going to do? What are we going to do, Rashi says, about these women who did Yibam already, following the Shita of Beis Shammai, u'v'nei mamzerim, and now their children are mamzerim? What are we going to do? What are we going to do if we follow Beis Hillel and we say that we should no longer do Chalitza Yibam? So we're basically making these women who had already done Yibam, following Beis Shammai, their children are going to be mamzer. So what exactly is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's concern? Yomit Bishlama also, if the people of Beis Shammai actually acted on his shita, and because of that they actually did do Yibam, well, Hainu de Ka'amar Manasa. Well, then Reb Shimon ben Gamliel has a good point. All of these children are now in peril because they're going to be considered mamzerim based on our minigna that we're going to all do like Beis Hillel. But if you're going to argue, like Reish Lakish said, that they didn't follow, like Rabbi Yochanan, that they didn't follow their own shita. Beis Shammai from day one followed the shita of Beis Hillel. My manasa, there is no problem. There are no people who did Yibum, and therefore there are no mamzer. So what exactly was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's concern? The question is, women, Rashi says, the concern was Beis Hillel's tzoros, who he allowed them to marry without any yibum or chalitza. Now the question is, what are you going to do with these women now? Because according to Beis Shammai, these women are Yevamos l'shuk. Exactly what are you supposed to do with them? And these are the details to explain what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was concerned about. Hanach tzoros the Beis Hillel, those tzoros of Beis Hillel, who he allowed them to marry other men because he held they weren't Jacob Yibum at all. The Beis Shammai, according to the people of Beis Shammai, this woman is now married illegally because she never had chalitza. So hechinavit. So the simple answer is, let's do chalitza now. What's the big deal, right? Hechinavit. So hechinavit lahu hechinavit. What should we do for them? Lichlatu. If we have them go do chalitza now, mim asi agavrayu. Their husbands are going to get pretty spooked from them, especially if their husbands are kaihanim. They're going to get very spooked because now they're going to look at their wife like they're chalutzos. That's going to put them into a bad situation. And if you're going to say, so big deal, get over it. This is we have to make things as smooth as possible. So we want to try to satisfy Beis Shammai's concern that these women need chalitza, but we can't do that because we never want to spook a man over his wife, because the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are beautiful. The Rebbeinu Shalom would never make, the Torah would never require a woman to be placed into such a bad position where her husband is not going to be spooked to be with her. And this Derech HaChanayim manifests itself in some fascinating ways. The halacha is, we know, a man is mechuyev in Puru, but a woman is not mechuyev in Puru. And the Meshech Chochmah says, the reason for this is because we know the halacha is, if a man is married to a woman for 10 years and doesn't have children, he has to marry another woman. He has to have children. So a man who Midoraisa could be married to 2 women, so it's not such a big deal. He takes on another wife. But if a woman is mechuyev of Puru, then she would be mechuyev to get divorced from her husband and find another husband. That's a lot more uncomfortable to force her to get divorced. Him, he just takes on another wife. Big deal. I'm sure his first wife won't mind, right? But a woman to have to divorce her husband, that's not the Racheh Darkei. So the Meshach learned the reason why a woman wasn't mechuyev in Puru is because of the Racheh Darkei.
1 minute. Don't we have? I think it's in Parshas Ba'aloischa. We have a situation where it says they were crying lemishpachesehem, boichem, right? And why? And Rashi's quoting Chazal saying that the husbands would have to divorce their wives if they were married to their aunts or under those circumstances.
After the Torah was given.
Yes. So if it's Darkei Noam, and the Torah would never put people into such a situation, it actually did.
So that's a good question. But the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't tell them to marry their relatives before. The Rebbeinu says now it's prohibited. So there they found themselves in a bad situation. Would Hashem tell them to put themselves into a bad situation? I mean, it's still not a geschmack situation to be in. But you're saying don't make it usher because they already did it. That's not nearly as a violation of the Chedach Hanoim as telling them to do something positively that's going to cause an issue. So let's see the Gemara. Tashma, the Amr Reb Tarfon. Reb Tarfon said to Avni, I can't wait. I can't wait. It's an intriguing of Ta'avani. I'm so excited to finally be able to Mosai Tovai Tzara Shabbas Liyodi. When will I finally be able to encounter a Tzara Shabbas, which is exactly this case that's a machloikis between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and I will make Yibam on her for Beis Shammai. Reb Tarfon usually followed the Shita of Beis Shammai. I believe he was Rashis. He was a Talmud of Beis Shammai, but he was the one who lied down when he said Krishma, and he put himself into danger because he followed the Shita of Beis Shammai. So Reb Tarfon said, when will I finally be able to do Yibam on the Tzara Shabbos? So the problem with that is clearly that saying that he is going to fear like Beis Shammai. So Gemara Ema the Asiena, I'm going to tell her to marry and not worry about Yibum. That's what it means. It doesn't mean I will be miyabmer. It means I will allow her to marry another person and not require chalitza.
Like, why is he? Does that Russian bother anybody? Like the fact that he's like hoping for somebody not to have children and hoping for somebody to die. Like, when is this going to happen? Like, it's a little bit odd.
Does he want such a tragedy to occur?
Really, what people do.
And again, it depends if your attitude and your approach to this Gemara is with Chassidus, and then every time you learn a case, you're devastated from the Torah, or if you're looking at it from the Lumdus.
That's what happened with Seifa. I was a good to the book before.
Thank you more about the Avni Kamar. He said that I'm dying to do something that obviously people aren't doing. Rashi says, "Vimke Beisil." If everyone does like Beisil, if you want to fear out like Beisil, Ma Chidish Kulam Hachinahag. That's what everyone's doing. So what do you mean I can't wait till I can do this? That's what everyone's doing. Zok Gemara Lafuki Midi Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Fakert. Rashi says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said they should do chalitza. I want to have the opportunity to paskin not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and paskin outright like Beisil. So once again, you don't have a raya that they followed the Shammai's ruling. Tashma. So let's find another case where we could possibly prove that they followed the Shammai's ruling. Masha, there was a story. The Bito shel Rabbi Gamliel, the daughter of Rabbi Gamliel, Shahisha Nesua la Abba Achid. So Rabbi Gamliel had a brother by the name of Abba, and Rabbi Gamliel had a daughter who was married to his brother Abba. Umeis v'lo badim, and Rachman was done. Rabbi Gamliel's brother passed away without children, and his daughter became an almana. The Yibam Rabbi Gamliel as Sarasa, and Rabbi Gamliel actually did Yibam to his brother's second wife. He actually did that. Tizbara. How could you say that? Rabbi Gamliel mitalmidei beishamayu. Zokt Rashi. Mitalmidei beishamayu bitmia. V'aloi mibnei bonav shel Hillel. He was from the Eniklach of Hillel. So how is it possible that Rabbi Gamliel would have done Yibam on the Torah if we know Rabbi Gamliel, his opinion would have surely aligned with Beis Hillel? So how did do Yibam? You know why Rabbi Gamliel was able to do Yibam on his daughter's Torah, even though Beis Hillel holds that Asher with the Chi of Karish, you can't do Yibam, is the islandless Havoy. His own daughter was an islandless. And since his own daughter was an islandless, Rashi says, in our Mishnah it says, I should name to islandless to the same with Torahs. Because it came out Lemafreya that the marriage between his daughter and his brother was never valid. How could you say that that's the case? This brisa that we just quoted, that talks about Rabbi Gamliel doing Yibam on the Torah, the Sefer of the brisa says, others say that Bida Rabbi Gamliel islandless hoisa, which means only the Sefer is saying that we're speaking about a woman who was an islandless, and therefore he was able to marry the Torah. Mechlal the Tanakama Savar Lav islandless hoisa. So obviously the Tanakama, it describes that Rabbi Gamliel married the Tzara of his daughter, even though she wasn't an islandless, because islandless was only introduced in the Sefer. That was the second option. So the Gemara, no. Both in the Reisha and the Sefer, it's referring to a daughter that was an islandless. But the Nafkamina is, and Rashi explains that according to the Tanakama, she was an islandless, and no one knew about it. In other words, Gamliel's brother didn't know about it. So therefore, we say that the marriage is not valid, which is exactly like the case in our Mishnah, and therefore he's allowed to marry the Torah. The Acherim held that even if it was Hikrba, even if his brother knew that she was an islandess, that's why he was married to a second wife, and he still wanted her, she still will not pater the Torah from Yibam. We had a machloikis before if the islandess paters her Torah from Yibam or not. So the second Tana, the Acherim held that if she's an islandess, she does not pater her Torah from Yibam, even though she's not Mechuyev Yibam, like we had the Psak of Rava a couple of blood ago at the top of the Amud Beis. A woman who could not have children.
Well, a lot of times women, they don't have children for 10, 12, 20 years, and then they have children. Is that an islandess?
No, islandness is a physical condition where she never reaches puberty. But they only discover it later on. I'm sorry? Oh, she doesn't even have a womb. Okay.
Okay, so it's not possible. So it's
There's no womb in her body to have a baby.
Right. So it's possible that a person can get married to a woman often or whatever it is, and then they discover.
And find out later that she's an islandess. That's right. That's right. Or maybe there was a difference chiluk between the ratio and the sefer. In both places, it was referring to an islandess. However, kanais ulubasayf girish ikabanai. We had a shaila if one doesn't answer the other one. Really, everybody holds that an islandess will answer her tzara. However, and in both cases, it's speaking where it was known and his brother knew it. The question is, when does an islandess pater tzara like any other erva? That's only if they were both married to the nifter at the same time. So the Tanakama could hold that they had to both be married at the same time, and the Acharim could hold even if he was not married at the same time, it still wouldn't answer. So let's have. I might have flipped it around. So let's see Rashi. The Tanakama al yidei shegirish echavas bitoy koydem misa. So the Tanakama holds that it didn't matter that they were both married to Abba at the same time, as long as he was megarish, Rabbi Gamliel's daughter, before Misa. That means when they fell to Yibam, the Bas, who was an islandess, never fell to Yibam. Abba Bishapar Konesh HaNachris, even though Abba was married to both Rabbi Gamliel's daughter as well as the other woman, he was married to both of them at the same time. But when he died, he was only married to the other woman. Still muteris hoil the girish as a erba the beside. Since at the end he was megarish the erba, which was Rabbi Gamliel's daughter, and when he died, he was never married. He was not married to Gamliel's daughter. But according to the second shot, hoil the chanis as a nachris koidim gerishin. Since he was at one point married to both these women at the same time, koidim gerishin erba, therefore a surah. So according to this shot, in the Reisha, in fact, she wasn't in the islands at all, but he divorced her before he died. According to the Tanakhama, that would be enough that the Torah Sharba will be mutter. According to the Sefer, it wouldn't be enough to be mutter the Torah Sharba. That's why in the Sefer, it also ought to say that she was an islandess, and therefore, you're part of him. The third shita, there's a third explanation for this two shitas, as by Sema, yesh tenai bebia ikabainai. There's a very big difference between someone who made kedushin through kasef, and if the kedushin is nullified, no, it's nullified. But if someone who makes kedushin with bia, if the kedushin gets nullified, now it turns out retroactively he did znus. So Rashi says there are shittas who hold that even though someone who marries an islandess wants to do a mekatos, he wants to undo the kedushin, that's only if he wasn't mekadosh bebia. But if he was mekadosh bebia, then he's moichel the fact that she's an islandess. He wants to remain married to her because he doesn't want to have made his bia, his original bia, into a biasmus. Anytime someone makes a t'nai, if you're an islandess, I don't want you to be married to me. But if he made kedushin with bia and he used that t'nai, he automatically waives that t'nai. He's not concerned that she's an islandess. He wants to stay married to her because he doesn't want his bia to have been a biasmus. So therefore, an islandess who is really a built-in t'nai, every islandess is like a built-in t'nai, it should be a mekatos, but that doesn't apply if a person make kedushin with bia. I'm sorry? If you hold yesh t'nai b'bia, then she would not need a get because it's a mekatos. But if you hold that a person thinks about things differently, if you make kedushin with bia, and he'll waive any of his akpadas because he doesn't want to retroactively make his bia to be a snus, then he would need to get.
Why does it have to be called a bias nus? You could consort with the pilegesh, okay, and that's not called znus and doesn't need a kedushin.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe if someone wants to pilegesh, it shows that he's not worried about it. But a normal person who normally marries a woman properly, maybe he's worried about making this be a business. But it's a child.
Yaakov will have this headache because in the morning when he found out it was Leah, right, he could have said, make a choice, I don't want to do this.
So he didn't want to make his being to be a nuts, so he stayed married to her. I hear. Okay. Zokten more weiter. Most of my Rav Mishasha. Rav Mishasha has a beautiful story that he asked the Kasha. Ma'aseh Rabbi Akiva. Once upon a time, Rabbi Akiva shalikot esrik be'echad b'shvat. Now, we know the halacha is in the Shemitah cycle. Year 1, it's Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Sheni. Year 2, it's Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Sheni. And year 3, it's Ma'aser Rishon and Ma'aser Ani. Instead of taking Ma'aser Sheni, you take Ma'aser Ani. We also know that there's a machlokes. When is Rosh Hashanah for an esrik? Rosh Hashanah Lilanis. Is it on the first day of Shvat or is it on the 15th day of Shvat? So Rabbi Akiva took an esrik off a tree on the first day of Shvat, and it was the 3rd year, or it may have been the 2nd year. We're not sure when it was. In other words, if Rosh Hashanah was Echad B'Shvat, so then it was in the 3rd year. But if Rosh Hashanah wasn't until Tu B'Shvat, then it's still in the 2nd year. So the question is, on this esrik, is he supposed to take Ma'aser Sheni because we consider it from the 2nd year, and Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Leilanos, or is he supposed to take Ma'aser Ani because Rosh Chodesh Shvat makes it into year 3 and it'll be Ma'aser Ani? So what did Rabbi Akiva do? The Nog by Beis Yisur, he actually took 2 Maasers from it. Echad Kediver Beis Shammai, Echad Kediver Beis Hillel. So you see Shemamina Asu. You see that Rabbi Akiva followed the Shita of Beis Shammai. So if Rabbi Akiva followed the Shita of Beis Shammai because he saw it necessary to take off Meiser based on Beis Shammai's opinion, you have a raya that they did follow the halachas of Beis Shammai. So once again, you have a raya Asu. So Gemara, no, that's not what it was at all. Rabbi Akiva didn't remember who said what. He wasn't sure if Beis Hillel said Rosh Hashanah Leilanos is Rosh Chodesh, or if Beis Hillel said it was Tesvav. Rabbi Akiva Gamrei established. So therefore, you don't have a ride that anyone was kosher to Beis Shammai. Rabbi Akiva was only going to follow Beis Hillel, but he wasn't sure what Beis Hillel said.
I mean, it's hard to believe.
What?
It's hard to believe that he didn't know.
I didn't have to risk the road. He said, I'm not one here.
Was that?
The same thing happened with the risk the
Right.
road, right? He ate out of the sukkah.
Right.
He drank water out of the sukkah to
Right.
show that we're not machmir.
Uh-huh.
Right? We just don't know the halacha.
Uh-huh.
Here we know the halacha. It's just
I hear.
Torah is a meshubah.
I hear. So Tosfos says, regardless, you have to learn that Rabbi Akiva didn't know, because otherwise, we learned halacha is if somebody does the churmas of Beis Shammai and the churmas of Beis Hillel, the Gemara considers him a fool. Aksil b'chosh choylech. So regardless, you have to say that it was because Rabbi Akiva wasn't sure what Beis Hillel said. So once again, we're still looking for some type of proof that they did. Beis Shammai followed their own opinion, and they did not listen to Beis Hillel's opinion. Masav Marzutra, Ma'aser v'yolda kalosei shel Shammai Hazakeh. Shammai Hazakeh, the source of all these halachas, his daughter-in-law had a baby. He had an einikel, and there's a small, tiny little baby here, who, according to Beis Shammai, was mechuyev in the mitzvah of sukkah. Because Beis Shammai holds even a cotton not tzarech li'imoy is mechuyev in mitzvah sukkah. We paskin only a cotton she'ain tzarech li'imoy is mechuyev even in chinuch. But what did they do? Upiches es mamaziva. They opened up the roof above the bed. They made a built-in sukkah over the bed of this baby. So don't you see that they're following the psak of Beis Shammai? Shemami na'asu. You see they were mocked with to keep the psak of Beis Shammai. So Gemara, when do we say it was lo yasu? That's only if it would stick out. Everybody would see your passing by Beis Shammai. But the fact that they opened up a roof and put a skylight over the baby's room, Hasam Araya Oimer Lafuje Aberkavid. He wants to air out the room. He wants there to be fresh air. He wants better ventilation in the room. But you don't have a rye from there. It doesn't stick out that that's passing like Beis Shammai.
You don't need stuff for ventilation.
I guess they want ventilation, but they don't want to get wet. I'm not sure exactly how to do that. Moses Marzutra. Marzutra had a kasha. Ma'aser b'shoikes yehu. So Hoyshe b'Yushalayim. Shoikes yehu, Rashi says, is an even chalula shetachas tziner hamekaleach mayim minahar. He had a a stone that was like a bowl. I think it was a stone that was like in the shape of a bowl, and it was right underneath running water that was running off a mountain. And they called that place Shoykis. Now the problem is that didn't have 40 saw in it. And therefore, in the Kuvala mikvah, there was a small hole in it that connected it to a body of water that was in fact 40 saw, that was a kosher mikvah. And through that connection, it made that the water in this little bowl was also kosher to toivel. And all of the kalim that they had to toivel in Yerushalayim, nasin al gabo, were actually toiveled in that mikvah. So that means it was a kosher. It was assumed to have been kosher for everybody. But we know the halacha is, the Gemara is going to say in a second, that how big does a hole have to be between something that's not a kosher mikvah and a kosher mikvah to say that they're connected? There has to be a hole, kishvayferes hanoid, which is the type, a straw that you would put into a jug, and the Mishnah is going to tell us that its 2 fingers could go into the hole and spin around. So there's enough room for 2 fingers to go in loosely. And what happened is Beishamai holds that's not good enough. And what did Beishamai do with this particular case? Beishamai said that he didn't like that hole, so he made the hole much bigger. He opened up the opening much bigger. Beishamai holds you have to take away most of the separation. That means most of the separation in between the water that you're using and the water of the mikvah have to be removed. Which would mean in our mikvah nagura, most of the wall would have to be removed. Correct.
No, the whole wall has to come down.
Right of the wall has to come down.
Right, but
Right.
the wall is not
That's
just
right.
another bigger hole.
Correct.
It's half the wall.
It's a whole different game. That's right. With Tanan, but we learned that they still hold differently. They still hold, which is how we pass in the ear of mikvah, it's kishvei feres anoid, be'uvya u'bechalala. Meaning this straw that they used had a thickness to its wall. So not just the opening inside the pipe, but the outside dimension of the pipe. We call it OD, outside dimension. It's big enough to put 2 fingers in and spin them around loosely. So Shemamina also, you see Beishamai had eingeführt his halachas. So you see that they paskin like Beishamai. So Gemara, once again, that's not something that is perceived as being paskin like Beishamai. Because Hasam, Haroya, someone who sees it, wouldn't say that he was trying to put his chumrah and hilchas mikvoyes and institute that in Yerushalayim. That wasn't what people would interpret this action as. Rather, they'll say lafushimaya hudakavid. He wanted more water there because he wanted to have access to more water, but not because of a halachic issue. That doesn't look for 2 Torahs. There, also Beishamai Kidivreya.
This what's his name? Does this more mean to say that the Shammai themselves, Shammai himself did not enact his chumras?
Correct.
It's all theoretical.
No, I guess after the psak came out, he followed the psak of his own. It's a Beishamai, yeah. No, but Shammai has zaken. The story before Shammai has zaken. Oh, there he starts his own psak, but it didn't look bad. Tashma. This is another very interesting and fascinating story. When I was learning Torah by Rabbi Yochanan Achirani, I noticed I saw that my Rebbe was poverty-stricken, and it was a hungry year, and he literally didn't have food. All he ate was dried out hard bread with salt. So when I came home for Bein Hazmanim, I told my father, "Oi, my Rebbe is such a tzaddik. He's not to eat any delicacies. He only eats hard bread with zaysim." Basi v'idati asaba. Omali, what are you kidding me? That's not because he's a tzaddik. It's because he's so poor he doesn't have anything to eat. When you go back to yeshiva, I'm going to send you with delicious food so he should be able to have what to eat. And he told me, "Haylech lo zaysim. Bring him olives. Bring him olives." V'haylachti lo, and I brought him olives. So I brought him olives that were moist in a kli cheres. He saw that they were moist. Now, if they're moist, it means now they're hukshur l'kabel tuma. If they're hukshur l'kabel tuma, Rashi says, shein lachin, which is the second line in Rashi from the top, the hukshur l'kabel tuma, and we know that kli cheres tami al gav ama aretz, a klicheres will come tummy from an amaretz. This is a little bit troublesome because we don't see anywhere that if the amaretz touches the outside of a klicheres that it becomes tummy. So there's a big shaila if this means that, or if it means that the amaretz might have put his hands inside the klicheres, or maybe there's an extra chomer for outside. There's a lot of talk about that. But whatever the case is, maybe the klicheres is tummy. The shema naga begava chavis. Maybe the amaretz touched the outside of the chavis, which would have made it tummy. U'tamed midrabanan. It would have made the keli tummy midrabanan. V'tamasam. And since these olives are now they're moist, they're tummy. So he didn't say, no, I'm akbid, I don't need your hechsher. That's not what he said. Rosh Hashanah Lachin, Amalii, he said, I don't like olives. I don't like olives. So Rabbi Aaron Kotler says, from here you see two things. If someone gives you a gift, don't say, Chaltish from the hechsher. Ich esse es nicht. Don't throw frumkeit at him. And rather say, I'm not hungry now. Do it in a nice way. And you see the second limit from here is you have Rabbi Yochanan who was starving to death. He was starving to death, right? Nevertheless, and now he has an opportunity to have gishmak of fresh olives. Yet he said, these are not my principles. My principles don't allow me to eat them. And even though he was hungry, nevertheless, he still was able to resist eating these olives. I'm sorry? Maybe Taki didn't like it. Basi, I came. Voidati es abo, and I told my father that he didn't eat them. Omar Lee, so my father chapped right away that this is a halachic issue, and he told him, Leich ve'emor loi, go quickly and tell Rabbi Yochanan that these are not hukshul kabel tumah. You know why? Because chavis nekuva haisa, ela shesasmua shmar. Now, when is a fruit hukshul kabel tumah? If it comes into contact with mashkin, that's only if you wanted it to come into contact with mashkin. So if it was a closed bowl, I know that there's going to be juice that'll ooze out of the olives, and I know they're going to touch the olives. So that would be hushul kabel tumah. But if I didn't want those olives to come into contact with the moisture, what would I do? I would make a hole at the bottom of the keli so that any juice that comes out will drain right out. So the father of Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok, Rabbi Tzadok said, tell Rabbi Yochanan the keli that you brought it in had a hole in it because we don't want the olives to come into contact with juice, and therefore it's not hukshir. Lamai said there was juice in it. That's because the shmarim plugged up the hole. The drain hole got blocked, but originally there was a drain hole in it. But whatever the case is, we're not nicha that the olives should become wet. So they weren't hukshul kabel tumah, so you don't have to worry that they became tumah, you can eat them. Sorry? Didn't Rabbi Yochanan see all this? He saw it was closed, but maybe it was closed purposely. So Utnan we learned, if you have a barrel full of zaysim and they're in there tight, migol golim, Rashi says the chukim they're tight, and I couldn't figure out if this is just happens to be the case, or if it has to be tight for a reason. I couldn't find anything. I'm not sure if the Arshko says anything, or if anybody has any pairs that says if it was negela locha that they should be tight. Beishamai says, "Ain tzricha nake." You don't have to make a hole; they still will not be hoshul kabel tumah. You know why? Because the juice that comes out of an olive is not oil. When you squeeze it, oil comes out. The juice is just juice. Beishamai hold that the juice that comes out of an olive is not one of the sheva mashkin, and therefore, even if I wanted those olives to come into contact with that juice, they still wouldn't be hoshul kabel tumah. It's only Beis Hillel oimim tzricha lenake. Umaydim, but Beis Hillel does agree that Hashem nikva, if there was a hole in the keli, which shows clearly I don't want the olive to come into contact with moisture. Bisasmua, shmarim, but it got blocked, the drain got blocked. Shehi Torah, even Beis Hillel would agree that it's Torah and it wouldn't be hoshul kabel tumah. Zokt the Bryce of Eiter. The Aval Pi, she Talmud Shammai Hoya, even though he was a Talmud of Shammai, even though he was a Talmud of Shammai. So who was the Talmud of Shammai? It says over here, Rab Tzadok was a Talmud of Shammai. So even though Rab Tzadok was a Talmud of Shammai, so according to Rab Tzadok, he didn't need that there would have been a hole there. Anyway, according to Rab Tzadok, this would not have become Tamei. Even he nevertheless always followed the ruling of Beis Hillel, even though he was a Talmud of Beis Shammai. So let's analyze this. This is a big chiddush that he follows Beis Hillel Shita. If the norm was for a Talmud of Shammai to do the Allah of Shammai, Haini Rabusai. That's saying that their tzaddik was great that he did this. Aliyamit loyasu my Rabusai. What's the chiddush? Everybody would have done that because that's the norm. So this seems to be a raya. Here the Gemara seems to finally have a raya that Talmidei of Shammai actually followed the halacha of Shammai, but Rav Tzadok did something out of the norm, and he was machmer even according to Beis Hillel, and he made a hole in this cave. Okay, so now we finally have a conclusion. The Gemara is more right, but here we finally have a conclusion that the Talmidim of Shammai, the norm was for them to follow the ruling of Shammai.
Nice story. It reminds me of the story with Rebel Lapjan and the cat. Remember the picture with the cat?
Yeah, what's the story behind that story?
So
How's that picture?
it was a buffer. So this was a controversial picture where Rebellion Lapjan was feeding a cat milk. Right? In Lakewood, they couldn't believe it. So there was a fellow that was in Farsidim at the time. And he said, I'll tell you the story behind the picture. The story behind the picture is that we brought a cat in because it was full of mice. So Rebellia had asked us, is the problem fixed? There's no more mice in the dormitory? We said, yeah. So he said,
This is a Ma'aseh Shaya?
Nice to show you. So the Rebellia said, so what are you feeding the cat now? Well, what do you mean what's feeding the cat? The cat eats the mice. They said, you just told me there's no more mice. So Rebellia said, okay, we have to go get the cat milk. And that was behind the story.
Really, very interesting.
So
You could have just bought a picture of a child.
So this is what's the name? They were tomorrow. What you didn't need? You think it's because he's broke? You don't think because
Very good. Tashma. Shalu is Rabbi Yeshua. They asked Rabbi Yeshua the following question. Tzaras Abbas Mahu. What is the halacha with the Tzaras Abbas? Our question, the big question that we've been discussing. Amalahem, he told them, Machloikis Beishamai u'Beis Hillel. It's a machloikis between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel if the Tzaras Abbas should make yibum or if she should marry a third party without any chalitza. And the halacha kedivrim, and who is the halacha like? Who do we pass like? So he said, Amar lahem, what do you want from me? Why are you forcing me to give an opinion and tell you if the Erev in Toronto is kosher? Don't ask me such questions. Don't ask me such questions. Why are you getting me involved? No matter who I paskin like, I'm going to get slammed by the other party. See, this isn't new. This is how it always was. I'm terrified. Shema Yerutu Galgalti. I'm afraid that the party that I paskin again will crush my skull. So don't make me comment on such a controversial issue. But what I will tell you definitive is Ani made lachem al shtei mishpachos gedolos shahayu b'Yerushalayim. I'm going to tell you about two families, great families that were in Yerushalayim, and their names are Mishpachos Beis Tzevuim mi ben Achmoi, u'Mishpachos Beis Kupoi mi ben Nekoshesh. These are the two families. Shehem b'nei Tzaris. They happen to be the children of women who followed Beis Hillel's ruling and married other men without a chalitza, and umehem kohanim gedolim v'shimshu al gabe mizbeach. So these women married kohanim, and therefore their children were kohanim. And from this family, from people who followed the psak of Beis Hillel, we have kohanim gedolim. That I can tell you because that's not putting me ahead into my clothes. I'm telling you facts. This is what happened. I'm sorry?
They wouldn't be sorry.
Yeah, the case was these children, Kohanim, their parents were the mother who was a Tzaras Erva, and she just married somebody else. That's where these right. That's where these women came. That's where these fellow came from. So they followed Beis Hillel against Beis Shammai. Zaktamar Utai, the Rashi says that. The English gets it from Rashi. Zaktamar Iyamik B'Shleim. I'm sorry. It was, yeah. Even in our days, but it's Friday and still even, I think.
The tragedy is common.
It's hard to answer.
What I mean to say is that it seems like it's common. Nothing to follow them.
Yeah, it happens. So Iyamik B'Shleim also, if you say that that people used to fear like Beishamai, because there are people who go this way, people who go that way, and Yeshua didn't want to paskin. If you hold that nobody followed Beishamai's ruling anyway, am I coming to why would he be afraid to paskin according to the psak that everybody is following anyway? So that wouldn't put him into any type of danger. If even the people of Beishamai were following the ruling of Beis Hillel, why would Rabbi Yeshua be afraid to get involved? Zok Gemara in Hinami to Asu, and let's say in fact some people did follow the ruling of Beishamai. My Misyariani, why would Rabbi Yeshua be afraid anyway? Nobody would have been angry at him if he would have paskin like Beis Hillel against Beishamai, because Amar Rabbi Yeshua ein mamzer ela mechayv Mrs. Bezdin. According to Rabbi Yeshua, even though he's paskin like Beis Hillel, that means Beishamai, who allows this woman to do yibum, is creating a marriage between two people or chayiv chorus, right? He's also, according to Beis Hillel, Beishamai is allowing the Isra Beishazach, which is a chayiv chorus. That wouldn't condemn anybody, because according to Rabbi Yeshua, that wouldn't create a mamzer. So I guess that the reason why Beishamai would get angry is he's labeling them as mamzerim. Could be, but it's not making them mamzer. So if it's not a mamzer, people wouldn't get so angry at him. So Shlomo is asking, but he's making them pogum. That's enough of a reason that they should get angry at him. That's what the Gemara says. The child would be a pogum. So Shunaimo Beishamai will be very angry if I would pass him like Beis Hillel.
The previous, the Kahanim did a very dominant task.
Those Kahanim were only the children of Chayv Elavan at worst. Here we're talking about children of Chayv Krisus, right? So Zok to Gemara, how did we know that they were pogum? We learn from an almana. Ma almana. There was an almana who married a kohen gadol. He was not allowed to marry a kohen gadol. She'ein yisur noig b'choil. Her issue is only to a kohen gadol. Everybody else could marry an almana. Nevertheless, b'na pogum. If she married a kohen, her child would be a chalol, or her daughter would be a chalol. She wouldn't be able to marry a kohen. Zu yisur shava b'koil. This woman who is over a chiyuv lav, according to or this woman who according to Beis Hillel, it's a chayv krisus, or even a chayv lav, for sure she would be also teguna. So you see that there would be a pagam. So that's why Rabbi Yeshua didn't want to get involved, because he's painting the children of Beis Shammai with the brush of pagam. So Zakta Gemara, kabo minei tsaris. They asked him, halacha l'maisa, is this woman allowed to marry out, or does she have to do yibum? That was the question they asked him. And like a typical Rav, the kapashidlei b'nei tsaris, and he answered them by talking about the status of the children of these tsaris. Why is he not answering their question and answering another question? Because tarti kabai minei. They really asked him two questions. They wanted to know tsaris mai, what should they do with the tsaris? Should they marry or they shouldn't? And if you're going to pass on like Beis Hillel, that these tsaris should marry other men, and they don't need yibum or chalitza, well then b'nei tsaris, the Beis Hillel leBeis Shammai mahu. The children of these women who Beis Shammai considers it that they married, and almana got married without doing yibum, so the chayv elaven. What does Beis Shammai hold is the status of these children who are the products of a marriage that's also Isra Lav in their opinion? No, the question is first of all, if you ask a question, should the woman do yibum or not? What are you going to tell us to do? That was the first question. And if someone did,
why do you have to say there's two questions? There's one question, and my answer is about the children. You're answering the first question.
No, you're not. You're not. He's saying with the evidence, but that doesn't mean that's what the right thing to do is. If you did like Beis Hillel, the children will be kosher. But what are you supposed to do, Lamai? See, he never answered. So Zok to Gemara, Lamai nafkamina. Why would I care what the status of these children are according to Beis Shammai? We don't pass with Beis Shammai. Zok to Gemara, it's very negate. Lemivshat vlad maser grushasi leBeis Hillel. All we wanted to find out is if there's a marriage where there's an Isser Lav, which according to Beis Shammai, that's all this is an Isser Lav. What is the status of the children who are the product of a marriage and of an Isser Lav? Where would it be relevant to us? If someone married a woman and then she divorced her and then she married somebody else, Now there's a law for him to take her back. He married her back again, and then they had children. So he is usher to his wife, the Israel. What is the status of those children? Are they going to be mutter lakuna? If there's girls, are they mutter lakuna? And if there's boys with their children, mutter lakuna or not? Does that make sense? So miyamrina, do you say kal v'chaymer, a kal v'chaymer, uma alman lakoy, madachad alman lakoy gadol, she'eni surah shabbat b'koil? It's not that the serious issue; it only applies to a specific group of people. Nevertheless, b'no pogum, her child born out of an illegal marriage between her and koy gadol will be a halal. Zu she surah shabbat b'koil. This marriage of marrying a gerusha, taking back a gerusha, where that's also to every from a yid, to every yid. Ain't I did? Surely the child should be pogum. Or maybe we can ask Kasha to say that there's a difference between almana l'kain gadol and a regular lav. And you can say mal almana she atzam is chalalas. And almana who marries a kain gadol, she becomes permanently possible from kahuna. So even if her husband dies, she may no longer go and marry a kain gadol, because the fact that she was married illegally to a kain gadol passes her permanently. So therefore her children are possible. Bashenkin, this woman, if he divorces this woman, she doesn't become apostle. She was already ushered to marry a kohen the moment she got divorced the first time. So it doesn't make her usher to anybody that she was not ushered to until now. So on that he answered, V'amalu tzarais misyare ani. I'm afraid to tell you what the woman should do who finds herself in such a predicament. But b'nei tzarais ani meid lachem. I could tell you that b'nei tzarais, which means chayvei lavin, the children, the products of chayvei lavin, are not pogum, because these children ended up being kohanim gedolim. Okay, let's stop here, and B'ez Hashem will be mamshech tomorrow. So everybody holds it's a lot. That's not under dispute. We just wanted to know, but we asked the question, if according to Beis Shammai, this is Osher B'Yisrael, and the halacha is that the children are mutar l'kahuna, then I can say anywhere else where there's a chi of lav in the Torah, according to anybody, the children will also be mutar l'kahuna. So we were just trying to find the case where there's an initial lav and see if the children will be also l'kahuna. Publicized? They were outed. They were doxxed. So just to review what we had today, we were just looking to see if Beis Shammai would follow their own psak or not. So we had a whole bunch of different shilas where it came out. There was the baby who was born that they opened up on top, right? There was the Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, he wanted to make the chalitza. We had the case of the water hole that they opened up, and then we had the case of Rabbi Yeshua, who they asked this question to about whether or not they could, whether or not the children are mutter, and Rabbi Yeshua didn't want to get involved in themselves. But we ended up finding a raya that they did follow, and the raya at the end was from the case of the parents. No?
The olives.
That's right, the olives, right?
The wet olives. Right. But was that before the gospel, after the gospel?
I think all this was after the